social media, all this stuff, it's not what we call an ideological contributor. It's not contributing to the origin of narcissism. No one is becoming narcissistic because of Instagram, right? It is what it's done is it's created the fertile ground. It's created the petri dish. So it is allowed to flourish there. It's given them a mothership. It's given them the arena, as it were. So I'm old enough to have known a world, a full grown ass adult world where there were not these things, right? Where I still type, at the beginning of graduate school, I still used a typewriter to type papers, still had to write code for statistical analysis programs. So I come from that era. So these things didn't impact me developmentally, but they are impacting people developmentally now. However, at the end of the day, narcissism, like any personality style, I wouldn't even say it's a condition. I'd say it's a personality style. You've got a personality. I got a personality. Narcissistic person has a narcissistic personality. Sure. It's a maladaptive personality because it puts them at odds with other people because it doesn't account for other people, but it's also associated with success, which we'll get to in a minute. But what happened is the narcissistic people have always been there. They were there long before there was internet. They were there long before there was Instagram or selfies. I don't know if you've ever tried to take a picture of yourself with a film camera, but I do remember those days, like being in the Eiffel Tower when I was like in high school or something. I'm like, you're doing and either you got your eyes or you got your chin or you got your ear. We didn't have pictures with ourselves in them unless somebody took the picture. So the whole selfie Instagram of it all, right? That took something that already existed. A person becomes narcissistic through a complex combination of temperament, of attachment, of parenting, of early life exposure, of early life environment, and all that goes into a blender, and that creates our personality. And the identical conditions for two people can still create two very different personalities. Yeah. So it's not a personality science is not a perfect ideological science. But then you create this thing called social media. And I had a very, very interesting conversation, which I keep bringing up with a guy named Dr. Keith Campbell, who's a brilliant researcher at the University of Georgia. And he's been studying narcissism for as long as I have, but he's done it more as a personality and social psychology researcher, where I've done it more as a clinician, as a person who practices. And we both kind of agreed with this. Narcissism's always been there. This is not new. These people who held court and behaved like jerks and had no empathy, they've always been around. They just got their audiences and their validation in different ways. Where the internet has gotten real interesting, grandiose narcissism, arrogant, preening, pretentious, always a thing. But these vulnerable narcissistic folks, aggrieved, resentful, sullen, angry, moderately paranoid, no empathy, lots of grudging entitlement, failure to launch, that form of narcissism has gone off in the era of social media. These are your internet trolls. These are your angry people online. These are the people who just sort of go down the rabbit holes and why isn't it my turn? And how come nothing's working out for me? That group didn't have anywhere to go. I think they probably were just sort of loners or never got into intimate relationships or anything like that. This is a different group now. They have gotten pumped up in a way, and it's dangerous. This is a dangerous group because they are so aggrieved. And so it is not that social media makes it, it fosters it. And here's the thing, not everyone who takes a selfie is narcissistic. It is a means of communication. I've got kids who are in late adolescence, early adulthood, and I watch them, when they were babies, it didn't exist, but I watch them use it, and it's not as dysfunctional as I would think. It's very seamless. They're communicating with people. They're engaging with their lives. There's follow-up conversations. They're using a language I don't use because I didn't come up speaking it. So it is, my kids aren't always taking selfies. They're on it a lot, but then they'll turn to, and I'll say, what are you watching? And they'll turn to me. They'll show me a video about how someone made salsa. And they're like, isn't it interesting how they made that salsa? And I'm like, I really can't be mad at this because they're actually just, you know what I'm saying? It's not that there's some things that are dysfunctional and they'll do body image stuff and all of that. Sure. However, we also know about the research, Chase, is that there's a subset of folks who are more vulnerable to the nefarious impacts of social media. And that group, we can't generalize that to all people, but that group is very high risk. So it's a very complicated landscape. Has Has it created a wonderful mothership for the narcissist? Yes. Does it cause it? No.
Got it. So let's just go into narcissism specifically then, since it's
Uh-huh.
existed since for all of
Always.
humanity.
All of humanity.
What are the telltale signs?
Mhm. So, narcissism as a personality style is characterized by somebody who has variable empathy, entitlement, grandiosity, a need for admiration and validation. They are envious of other people. They think other people are envious of them. They're arrogant. They're selfish, superficial, vain. They think everyone wants to be like them, or they covet being like other people. Very materialistic, very controlling. They're very motivated by power and domination. Now, all of that's happening. That's
Sure.
like this big sphere of narcissism. What's at the core of this sphere? Insecurity, shame, vulnerability. And they want to view themselves as perfect. So, all that regular people stuff, that's not going to work for them. So, this stuff like the grandiosity and the arrogance and the entitlement, that's their suit of armor. And this idea of interpersonal vulnerability, oh, heck no, that's not happening for them. So they really come and muscle up in relationships. And so that's narcissism. And obviously, there's a million more subtleties than that.
Sure.
It's on a continuum, it's not an either or, it's not you're a narcissist or you're not. At the mildest ends on the spectrum of narcissism, you're talking about someone who's sort of, again, more of this Instagram selfie, look at me, isn't my breakfast interesting? Aren't I pretty? Don't I have a cool car? Emotionally sort of stunted and immature. They're probably not harmful, certainly not someone that you're going to have a very fulfilling long-term committed relationship with, not someone who's probably going to be a very healthy parent, but they're not harmful people, right? They're sort of ridiculous in some ways. When you get to the highest end of the severity spectrum, now you're talking about more of a malignant narcissism, and you're almost like veering into territory that's like psychopathy. It's
Mhm.
not psychopathy is its own thing, separate, but in malignant narcissism, you see exploitation, coerciveness, deep levels of manipulation, isolation, cruelty. That's very different than
Yeah,
someone who's posting pictures of their breakfast in a bikini.
got it. Helpful.